Welcome back. There's a new trend regarding alcohol consumption. It seems more of us than ever are rethinking our drinking with a movement some people are calling sober curious. Joining us today to talk more about it is Hadley Sorensen, a sobriety advocate and author of The Dirty Truth on Social Drinking, Everything in Moderation and Other BS. Welcome. That's a great title for a book.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Of course. So what inspired you to write a book like this?
Well, I quit drinking just over 3.5 years ago after many years as an enthusiastic social drinker. And when I first quit drinking, I read lots of books, memoirs about drinking and alcohol. They were a huge part of my journey, but I realized that I couldn't fully relate to most of these books. I didn't see myself in these stories because most of them were those typical kind of rock bottom experiences that we think of. And that's just not where I was. My drinking followed social conventions. I drank the same way everyone around me was drinking. No one had any idea that I was struggling. It was still a problem, so I quit. But along the way, I realized that I could be the person to tell this story from the kind of gray area of drinking that we're starting to hear more about for other people in that situation, so they would have a book they could relate to.
Yeah, it's great that you had kind of the courage to do that, to put yourself out there and your stories out there, because there are probably a lot of people like that. They're not what you think of, whatever that stereotypical alcoholic is. It's, you know, you're talking about social, mom, happy, like living life like everyone else.
It's very common.
Very common, yeah. So what is the dirty truth about social drinking?
Well, that's a loaded question, right? There's a lot of myths and misconceptions about alcohol that we're really just starting to recognize and unpack. But one of the biggest, I think, is this old notion that there's only two categories of people. Either you're an alcoholic or you're normal. And we know now that that's just not true. It's not black and white. There's lots of gray area. And your drinking can absolutely be problematic even if you are someone who you would just consider to be a social drinker. So this old idea that we have to hit some type of stereotypical rock bottom in order to change our drinking is really problematic, and it holds a lot of people back.
I can see how it would, because you just think, you know, what we see in the movies, and you're just so down and out. But it's important to realize you might have a problem and someone else drinking exactly as much as you or more doesn't.
Exactly.
So we're all just unique. Now, do you feel like this is representing a trend that you're seeing more of? People not drinking as much, or
Yeah, it's a huge trend. It's a movement that really seems to be gaining momentum. So many people are just waking up to the reality that alcohol is no longer serving them. It's more trouble than it's worth a lot of times. And you know, people are really getting curious about the benefits of cutting back or quitting altogether. And the good news is there's more tools and resources than ever before to help people do that. And conversations like this are important because they are normalizing sobriety and really helping to break the stigma around that choice not to drink, which crazily has always been an issue.
I know. I recently read an article and it was talking about millennials, like the younger generation, who are also just choosing not to drink. You know, we all think go to college, that's what we do, or that's when it starts, but younger people are just starting that now too. It's shifting. Now, okay, what advice do you have for anyone who's starting to question themselves? Maybe they think they want to stop drinking. What advice do you have for them?
Well, what I would say is, it's a process, and it's not something that happens overnight. So you need to be patient. You need to give yourself a lot of grace. One of the first things I tell people to do if they're in that space where they're curious and they're questioning their drinking is educate yourself. Start reading books about alcohol. When you start learning the facts and the science behind it now, it really paints a different picture than the old wine is good for your heart kind of story that we used to hear. So educating yourself is huge. Find a community that you can lean into. That can look so different these days. It can be an online community. I mean, there's so many great options.
Thank you. Where can we find your book?
It's available now on Amazon.
Awesome. Thank you, Hadley. Thank you so much for being here. If you're questioning your relationship with alcohol, you can find more tips and inspiration by following Hadley on social media at Hadley_Sorensen.